Hi boys and girls, welcome back to Penny's Reading Nook here in Spencer, West Virginia. Here doing a patch session for patch and building blocks, and our book today is called A Bad Case of Stripes. It was written and illustrated by David Shannon. Oh, that poor girl. Whew, looks like she's had better days, huh? There we've got some lima beans pictured on there. Wonder what lima beans are going to do. Camilla Cream loved lima beans, but she never ate them. All of her friends hated lima beans, and she wanted to fit in. Camilla was always worried about what other people thought of her. Today she was fretting even more than usual. It was the first day of school, and she couldn't decide what to wear. There were so many people to impress. She tried on 42 outfits, but none seemed quite right. She put on a pretty red dress and looked in the mirror, and then she screamed, "Ah!" Her mother ran into the room, and she screamed too. "Ah! Oh my heavens," she cried. "You are completely covered with stripes." This was certainly true. Camilla was striped from head to toe. She looked like a rainbow. Mrs. Cream felt Camilla's forehead. "Do you feel all right?" she asked. "I feel fine," Camilla answered, "but just look at me." "My goodness, you get back in bed this instant," her mother ordered. "You are not going to school today." Camilla was relieved. She didn't want to miss the first day of school, but she was afraid of what the other kids would say, and she had no idea what to wear with those crazy stripes. That afternoon, Dr. Bumble came to examine Camilla. "Most extraordinary," he exclaimed. "I've never seen anything like it. Are you having any coughing, sneezing, runny nose, aches, pains, chills, hot flashes, dizziness, drowsiness, shortness of breath, or uncontrollable twitching?" "No," Camilla told him. "I feel fine." "Well, then," Dr. Bumble said, turning to Mrs. Cream, "I don't see any reason why she shouldn't go to school tomorrow. Here's some ointment that should clear up those stripes in a few days. If it doesn't, you know where to reach me." And off he went. The next day was a disaster. Everyone at school laughed at Camilla. They called her Camilla Crayon and Night of the Living Lollipop. She tried her best to act as if everything was normal, but when the class said the Pledge of Allegiance, her stripes turned red, white, and blue, and she broke out in stars. Poor Camilla. The other kids thought this was great. One yelled out, "Let's see some purple polka dots." Sure enough, Camilla turned all purple polka dotty. Someone else shouted, "Checkerboard!" and a pattern of squares covered her skin. Soon everyone was calling out different shapes and colors, and poor Camilla was changing faster than you could change the channels on a TV. That night, Mr. Harms, the school principal, called. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Cream," he said. "I'm going to have to ask you to keep Camilla home from school. She's just too much of a distraction, and I've been getting calls from the other parents. They're afraid those stripes might be contagious." Camilla was so embarrassed. She couldn't believe that 2 days ago everyone liked her. Now nobody wanted to be in the same room with her. Her father tried to make her feel better. "Is there anything I can get you, sweetheart?" he asked. "No, thank you," sighed Camilla. What she really wanted was a nice plate of lima beans, but she had been laughed at enough for one day. Well, yes, I see," Dr. Bumble mumbled when Mr. Cream phoned the next day. "I think I'd better bring in the specialists. We'll be right over." About an hour later, Dr. Bumble arrived with 4 people in long white coats. He introduced them to the Creams. "This is Dr. Group, Dr. Sponge, Dr. Cricket, and Dr. Young." Then the specialists went to work on Camilla. They squeezed and jabbed, tapped and tested, and it was very uncomfortable. "Well, it's not the mumps," concluded Dr. Group. "Or the measles," said Dr. Sponge. Definitely not chicken pox, put in Dr. Cricket. Or a sunburn, said Dr. Young. Try these, said the specialists. They each handed her a bottle filled with different colored pills. Take one of each before bed, said Dr. Group. Then they filed out the front door, followed by Dr. Bumble. Uh-oh. That night, Camilla took her medicine. It was awful. When she woke up the next morning, she did feel different, but when she got dressed, her clothes didn't fit right. She looked in the mirror, and there, staring back at her, was a giant, multicolored pill with her face on it. Ah! Dr. Bumble rushed over as soon as Mrs. Cream called. But this time, instead of the specialists, he brought the experts. Dr. Gourd and Mr. Mellon were the finest scientific minds in the land. Once again, Camilla was poked and prodded, looked at and listened to. The experts wrote down lots of numbers, then they huddled together and whispered. Dr. Gourd finally spoke. It might be a virus, he announced with authority, and suddenly fuzzy little virus balls appeared all over Camilla. Or possibly some form of a bacteria, said Mr. Mellon. Out popped squiggly little bacteria tails. Or it could be a fungus, added Dr. Gourd, and instantly Camilla was covered with different colored fungus blotches. Poor Camilla. The experts looked at Camilla, then at each other. We need to go over these numbers again back at the lab, Dr. Gourd explained. We'll call you when we know something. But the experts didn't have a clue, much less a cure. By now, the TV news had found out about Camilla. Reporters from every channel were outside her house telling the story of the bizarre case of the incredible changing kid. Soon, a huge crowd was camped out on the front lawn. The Creams were swamped with all kinds of remedies from psychologists, allergists, herbalists, nutritionists, psychics, an old medicine man, a guru, and even a veterinarian. Each so-called cure only added to poor Camilla's strange appearance, until it was hard to even recognize her. She sprouted roots and berries, and crystals and feathers, and a long furry tail, but nothing worked. One day, a woman who called herself an environmental therapist claimed she could cure Camilla. Close your eyes, she said. Breathe deeply and become one with your room. Oh, I wish you hadn't said that, Camilla groaned. Slowly, she started to melt into the walls of her room. Her bed became her mouth, her nose was a dresser, and 2 paintings were her eyes. The therapist screamed and ran from the house. What are we going to do? Cried Mrs. Cream. It just keeps getting worse and worse. And she began to sob. At that moment, Mr. Cream heard a quiet little knock at the front door. He opened it, and there stood an old woman who was just as plump and sweet as a strawberry. Excuse me, she said brightly, but I think I can help. She went into Camilla's room and looked around. My goodness, she said with a shake of her head, what we have here is a bad case of stripes, one of the worst ones I've ever seen. She pulled a container of small green beans from her bag. Here, she said, these might do the trick. Are those magic beans? Beans? Asked Mrs. Cream. Oh, my, no, replied the kind old woman. There's no such thing. These are just plain old lima beans. I bet you like some, wouldn't you? She asked Camilla. Camilla wanted a big heaping plate full of lima beans more than just about anything, but she was still afraid to admit it. Ugh, yuck, she said. No one likes lima beans, especially me. Oh, dear, the old woman said sadly. I guess I was wrong about you. She put the beans back in her bag and started toward the door. Camilla watched the old woman walk away. Those beans would taste so good, and being laughed at for eating them was nothing compared to what she's been going through. She finally couldn't stand it. "Wait," she cried. "The truth is, well, I really love lima beans." "I thought so," the old woman said with a smile. She took a handful of beans and popped them into Camilla's mouth. "Mmm," said Camilla. Suddenly, the branches, feathers, and squiggly tails began to disappear. Then the whole room swirled around. When it stopped, there stood Camilla, and everything was back to normal. "I'm cured," she shouted. "Yes," said the old woman. "I knew the real you was in there somewhere." She patted Camilla on the head, then she went outside and vanished into the crowd. Afterwards, Camilla wasn't quite the same. Some of the kids at school said she was weird, but she didn't care a bit. She ate all the lima beans she wanted, and she never had even a touch of the stripes again. The end. And that was A Bad Case of the Stripes, written and illustrated by David Shannon. Now, I've got 2 different activities we're going to do. The first one we'll go over is an art project, and it is just basically you get you some paper. I did 2 here. One just on plain white paper, and the other one I took and made on lined paper. Guess what? Stripes. And what you need to do is you just need to trace your hand. So if you're left-handed, put your right hand down on a piece of paper and trace around it. Or you could even try taking your non-dominant hand, which I'm left-handed, and put it down on the piece of paper and take your pencil with a right hand and try to trace around your hand. Whew, that would be hard for me to do. And then after you do that, you just design. What kind of stripes are you going to have on your hand? What kind of bad case of stripes are you going to have? And like I said, there's one that I did the stripes going down the paper. And on this one, if I would have finished it, I believe, because my stripes are going this way, I would have colored each line a different color. But possibilities are endless. You use your own imagination and just have fun with it. There's no right or wrong answer for that. Okay? And now, the next thing we've got, if you might see some stuff over there on the counter, at my class of building blocks, for probably 5 years now, every Wednesday we have Cooking Wednesday. And we have a couple of rules about Cooking Wednesday. Number 1, once your hands are clean, don't touch your face. Don't touch your nose. And we've really been working on that right now. So, I have a wipe here, and I'm going to wipe off my hands. And then I'm not touching my face. Got it? And then the second thing about Cooking Wednesday is when you cook it yourself and when you have a hand in it, it always tastes better after you do some of the work. And let's see here. We are going to make lima bean dip. All right? We've got to have some, let me get it up here where we can see what's going on. Good. For lima bean dip, we have to have some lima beans and some garlic. And you had to boil those together and get those soft. So I did that last night. So here's our lima beans and 1 clove of garlic. Then we need some lemon juice. So I've got my lemon and I've got my cutting board because I have to cut my lemon in half. Got my little lemon juicer here and my knife. We also need some olive oil, and then we need some sesame seeds, and then we need a little bit of salt. And we have to have some measuring spoons. So I think I've got everything, and then we have to have a handy-dandy food processor. Ooh. Now this makes a lot of noise. And sometimes my kids at building blocks, they go, "Ah, too much noise." But they have a part in it. They help. They taste it and they go, it's delicious because I helped make it myself. So the first thing we have to do is we have to take our lima beans and our 1 clove of garlic, and we're going to dump them into our food processor. Get them all in there. We don't want to miss any of the lima beans. Okay, we've got that. So then the next thing on our recipe says we need 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. So we're going to get my stuff out of the way here. Bear with me, boys and girls. We're going to roll our lemon back and forth on our board, and that gets the juices ready to flow. So I'm going to cut my lemon in half. And we're going to put it in our fancy lemon juicer here. And we're going to squeeze the lemon juice into our food processor with our lima beans and our 1 clove of garlic. Now, I didn't measure it. It says 2 tablespoons, and I'm basically just going with the juice from 1 lemon. Squeeze that in there. Okay. Then it says we have to have 2 tablespoons of olive oil. So here's my olive oil. And we get our 1 tablespoon measuring spoon. And we have to count to 2. So 1, 2. 2 tablespoons of olive oil. And then we have to have 2 tablespoons of sesame seeds. I'm going to try to pour them right here. 1 tablespoon of sesame seeds. Get all of them out of there or not. They're kind of stuck to that olive oil. And 2 tablespoons of sesame seeds. And then they said 1 pinch of salt. Well, what's a pinch? Basically, it's just this teeny tiny little bit of salt. We can get our salt shaker turned on there. And there, a pinch of salt. All right, so let's see here. Cook lima beans and garlic in a pot of boiling water until lima beans are softened, about 10 minutes. Got that. Drain and let cool. We got that. Okay. Now, place lima beans, garlic, lemon juice, sesame seeds, olive oil, and salt in a food processor or a blender and process until smooth. So let's put our lid on our processor. All right, get ready. Hold your ears. See if it's smooth yet. And it said if our dip was too thick and we didn't like it that way, we could add more olive oil to it. But to be honest with you, boys and girls, I think that's pretty good the way it is. So we've processed it until it was smooth. And now it says transfer your dip to a bowl and enjoy. So we're going to try to, I'm just using the same bowl. I brought my lima beans in and my clove of garlic. And now another rule of building blocks is we try to encourage everybody to at least try a bite of it. And if it's something that you don't care for, just like in the book where they said, oh, yuck, I don't like that. Well, in our class, you're not allowed to say, yuck, I don't like that. What you need to say is, oh, no, thank you. I don't care for that. Because when you're saying, oh, yuck, that's disgusting, you might ruin it for everybody else. Someone might be like, I kind of want to try that, but you said, yuck, it was disgusting. But if you say, oh, no, thank you, I don't care for that, then you'll be like, well, you didn't care for it, but maybe I would care for it. So, we got our dip, and it says you can serve it with carrots or pita chips or whatever you wanted. I brought a bowl of carrots. And what we usually do is we pass all the food around and we all get a little bite. And then we count to 3, and then we do it all together at the same time. So 1, 2, 3. Actually, it's not too bad. And I have to say, I do not care for lima beans, but I tried them and I liked it. That was pretty good. And that was Cooking Wednesday on a Tuesday. We see everything here on our recipe. I actually found the recipe, boys and girls, and moms and dads, on Pinterest. I love Pinterest. I'm a Pinterest junkie. So if you can't see it real well here, just go on Pinterest and type in lima bean dip, and it goes along with the book, A Bad Case of Stripes. And I hope you all enjoy it. Something a little different you might not think of, but it was actually really good. And with that being said, that is another edition of Penny's Reading Nook, coming to you live from Spencer, West Virginia at the Patch office. And I will see you next time, boys and girls. Bye-bye. We miss you.